Hey fam, it's Dasa, and I don't know if you heard about what just happened in Miami, Florida a couple days ago, January 2024. Well, people are claiming that they saw 8 to 10 foot creatures, giant, Nephilim, whatever you want to call it. So you know I had to put my 2 cents in. Anything that has to deal with the basic instructions before living eternally, yes, the Bible, then you know I have to put my 2 cents in. So, what they're saying is this police presence was necessary because at the mall, there was a fight between some teenagers who were armed with sticks. Later on, they came out and said they were armed with sticks and fireworks. Now, why would they add fireworks? Maybe because of the pow pow that came later. The boom, 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 chicka, chicka, pow, click, click, pew, pew, pew. Y'all get it. Well, you tell me, does that look like they were just responding to some teenagers with sticks? Now, let me show you a video in California of a disturbance when the police were called out. And you tell me which one makes sense. Now, this was in California, January 2024.
5 teenagers in custody this morning following a brawl at the Del Amo Fashion Center. Police say roughly 1,000 teenagers entered the mall around 5 p.m. and began throwing bottles and causing a disturbance. That's when some sort of fight broke out. Police say a juvenile and a Torrance police officer suffered minor injuries. The mall closed early because of the incident. Authorities say there was no significant damage to the property.
So you just saw the response for about 1,000 adolescents throwing bottles and fighting. And this is what you got for a few kids fighting with sticks. Something's fishy. Gotta dig deeper. Because this presence is not the only thing. Let me show you what else happened.
And if I'm being completely honest, I'm not sure what part of this story bugs me most. The fact that we actually now live in a world where something like this could happen. The fact that we actually live in a world where something like this could happen, but at this point, none of us will even be shocked. Or the fact that something like this could happen in our world, and not a single news media has broke this story, not at all. In fact, if you Google search it, it is quite a difficult find, which is all that much more suspicious with a story of this kind of size, this magnitude. And yet, here we are. What they claim was the call, the reason for the police officers to arrive at the scene, was due to a fight that had broken out between juveniles who had sticks and fireworks. It gets better. Along with the ridiculously high number of police officers that arrived on the scene and the helicopter flying above, apparently after this incident was phoned into the police, the black PD helicopters were the only things flying that night in the Miami sky. As the Miami airport was shut down, still no flights going or coming at Miami International, only one PD helicopter patrolling the area.
So they sent all that backup and stopped incoming and outgoing flights at the airport.
And someone confirmed they've cut the police scanner. Check flight tracker, doesn't look like any flights leaving or coming into MIA. You can see the helicopter doing loops. Yes, they cut the scanners. Multiple people claim they saw 8 to 10 foot tall aliens or very tall zombies, and it caused shoppers panic. There are now black helicopters flying and everything is blocked off. Power has also been cut in a few blocks and at the mall. You're going to tell me that the police literally cut the public's access to the police scanners? All because some juveniles are fighting with sticks?
So they sent all that backup, shut down all ingoing and outgoing flights from the international airport, blocked off the area, cut the power, and cut access to police scanners because some kids were fighting at the mall with sticks?
Okay. And they're going to cut the power? Not only to surrounding areas, but also the power to the mall itself. So much so that 61,290 homes are without power at that time. On Reddit, we found anyone following what happened in Miami last night, apparently mass sighting of 7 to 10 foot tall creatures. Flights halted, police radio cut off, and helicopters patrolling. So are you really telling me that they're hoping, they're praying that we are all going to just believe this? Miami police, a large fight broke out involving several juveniles, some of whom may have been armed with some kind of sticks. Police are still continuing their investigation at this time. Okay. You know who else is doing their investigation at this time? Me. And the rest of the world. You cannot be serious when you tell me you're going to cut the power to the mall and multiple homes in Miami, shut down a whole airport, no planes in and no planes out, have hundreds of police officers storming the mall, rushing to the scene, and black PD helicopters scouring and patrolling the area from above. all simply because of a juvenile fight where some of the juveniles were armed with some kind of sticks. No, sir, I kindly reject this. I do not believe this at all.
So what do you think? Please tell me, I want to know. Especially if you were in Miami, Florida, and you heard anything. These are different eyewitness videos. But listen to this.
What did you hear?
Gunshots.
Oh, that's what that was? I didn't hear that. I just heard screaming.
Yeah, no, that's why I came running. I heard
Now, of course, if giants have been seen before, they would be no surprise to our government officials. Take a look at this story that I found about a giant. So this is Mr. Ballin. He tells true stories. So he didn't experience this firsthand, but he got the true story from the person who did experience it. And let me know what you think. We are living in the days of Noah. So I did cut right to the good part. But if you want to hear the whole story, go find his page.
Plus, they're looking for this lost infantry unit. So it's just a very slow movement through the mountains. And so over the first few days, nothing really happened. They didn't come in contact with the enemy. They didn't see any sign of this missing infantry unit. They just walked along the mountains carrying a bunch of gear, and that was it. At some point, they noticed a little bit farther ahead that there was this distinct pathway leading up the mountain and kind of around the corner. And it looked like a goat trail. There were lots of goats that would run around the mountainside, and it looked like a very well-developed goat trail. And they decided, let's just go up there. If nothing else, we can go up onto wherever this leads us and maybe look down across the other side of the mountain and see if we can see anything. And so the team starts making their way up this goat trail, and as soon as they start making their way up, they start noticing that there are little pieces of American military equipment on the ground. There are pieces of radios, like whip antennas and housing of the actual radio itself. They found military-style backpacks as well, and they started finding pieces of uniforms that belonged to the missing infantry unit. They knew based on the patches that were on these uniforms. So as they're walking up this trail of broken equipment and uniforms, they start seeing some bone on the ground. They didn't know if it was human bone or what. They start seeing broken bones scattered on their way up to this kind of plateau. And so now the Special Forces team, I mean, they're incredibly well trained. I mean, I'm not just being biased here. I mean, the Army Green Berets, the Army Special Forces, they're very similar to the Navy SEAL teams, which I was a part of. Two different units, no doubt, but very much peers. And the level of training you get in handling situations like this one, now granted this one's pretty unique, you're so well trained that when things start getting dangerous, it's like your training just kicks in, and everybody's does. And so I would imagine that when they saw this, what they were thinking is this was an ambush. This infantry unit was ambushed, and we're probably coming up on the ambush site. And so they're, taking defensive positions, and they're moving slowly and very tactically up this mountain, and they're keeping their weapons pointed at the leading edge on their way up to the top of this mountain. They get to this plateau. It's like a flat section of the mountain, right? It's like a steep mountain, and there's like this little shelf almost. And there's more equipment scattered and more bones scattered across it. And there's all these cave entrances right in front of them. It's as if they were intentionally placed so that they fed out onto this shelf. And so they start moving towards the mouth of the caves. And they realize, without even getting very close, that even though the mouth of these caves are pretty large and everybody could go into the cave, there is a steep drop-off. Like you'd walk in and then it just goes straight down. And someone kind of peered over the edge and couldn't see how far it went down. And they decided that it was just too dangerous to go in there because clearly something happened here where American lives were lost, based on the tattered uniforms and equipment. And so let's just pull back and take up defensive positions looking at the entrance to all of these cave entrances. And so as leadership goes down kind of out of the fatal funnels, if you will, outside of these caves, Mr. K, who's the guy who's told us this whole story, he said he's looking at one of the entrances to the caves and he sees a flash of movement inside of the cave. And he looks over at it. He doesn't have time to react to it or anything. And all of a sudden a spear comes flying out of the cave. This big, massive lance comes flying out and it goes right through one of his teammates whose name was Dan. And so Dan's down. And so the whole team saw that. They didn't see who threw it, but they certainly saw the spear hit Dan. And so as they're like shocked and just keeping their weapon up, wondering what's going to happen, out runs this, by Mr. K's account, a 12 to 15 foot tall man with a red beard and red hair down past his shoulders, comes charging out, howling like a war cry. He's got animal skins for clothes. He just looks super dirty. And he runs over to Dan to pull the spear out and probably use it again. And the rest of the team at this point is broken out of their shock of what they're seeing, and they start engaging this giant.
So what if they just killed the Noah of the giants? I mean, God saved one man. What if he saved one giant? Okay, maybe I'm doing too much. My bad. Back to the story.
And the giant didn't really have a chance to fight back, and in 30 seconds the giant is down too. So Dan's down and the giant is down. And the whole team is like, what just happened? So after the dust had settled and all the shooting had stopped, they went to check on Dan, and Dan had passed away. And so they called back into higher headquarters, and they're trying to describe what happened. A very large, possibly human creature threw a projectile that hit Dan. And so they sent 2 helicopters out, one to retrieve Dan and the team, the other just to hoist up this very large human-like creature because they wanted to know what it was. And they struggled mightily to get the netting around this big creature. It ended up weighing over 1,100 pounds. It had 6 toes on each foot, and it had 6 fingers on each hand.
Is that why AI can never get the fingers and toes right? Are they using some ancient tech? Okay, I'm doing too much. Sorry, back to the story.
They load it up, they string it onto this helo, and it takes off. And the team gets into the other helicopter, and they go back expecting to be debriefed as soon as they get back to base. The helicopter with the giant would fly to an airfield, and they would meet up with a crew of a C-130, which is another big military aircraft. The pilot of that craft would publicly say that he remembers seeing a 12 to 15 foot tall giant person with 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. And he would say that's what he saw, even though it was later redacted and made top secret. Mr. K and his team, they flew back to the base to be debriefed. And so they had to provide an after action report. It's something done in the military. You go out, you do any operation, you come back, and you write up what happened. And so Mr. K and his team decided to just be honest about what they saw. And so they described it again in detail. 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes on each foot. It came out, it threw the spear, it hit Dan. It was this horrible situation. And once they submitted it, their leadership said, you got to rewrite that. We're not going to accept that. So Mr. K said they ultimately rewrote it, and it just sounded like a typical engagement in the mountains with the enemy. And it was made top secret, and then they never saw it again. And that was it. Mr. K said that he and the rest of his team also had to sign non-disclosure agreements to not ever talk about what they saw. And they never got any word about what actually happened. What did they do with the body of the giant?
So, like and comment. What do you think about that story? What do you think about what happened in Florida? What do you think about living in the days of Noah, meaning giants will be among us? What do you think about all of this? I mean, people are quick to throw off the book of Enoch and say, no, giants never existed, but we'll accept the story of David and Goliath. So we know that giants existed in those days. We know that the trees were cut down so that the giants couldn't escape. Is it possible that the Lord did save a family of giants for this very day? I mean, what do you think? And another thing, if we're going to revisit the giants and the Nephilims and things that Enoch spoke about, we need to also look into the calendar. We are living in the last days. We need to repent. If you have not gotten your life right with God, now is the time to do it. We will be taken to a point where people will be seeking death and not be able to find it. We are coming into times that we don't even understand. And the best way to make sure that we are good, the only way to make sure that we are good, is to make sure that we are good with God. The seal is the Sabbath. If you have no understanding on the Sabbath, then please learn about it. And also, it's time we get off of this man-made calendar. It is not what God gave us to keep track of His timing. The luminaries show us everything. Peace.